You're listening to the most captivating podcast in iTunes. That's right, the Elite Man Podcast, where we turn average men into elite men every day. We interview the very best experts from the lifestyle, health, fitness, social, and even entrepreneurial worlds. And with their help, we give you some of the best advice on the planet. Subscribe now if you haven't already and enjoy the show. And oh yeah, if you really enjoy it, leave us a review. On today's episode number 292, entitled, How to Unify Our Country and Keep Our Freedom, I chat with Sean Parnell. Sean Parnell is a decorated combat veteran, New York Times best-selling author, father, leader, and the Republican candidate for the 17th Congressional District of Pennsylvania. In today's episode, Sean talks about his leadership experience in battle and how he was able to unify his platoon of 40 men and successfully carry out life-or-death missions. He discusses the truth about being a leader, his call to run for office, the dirty political games he's faced, the fake news media, and what he hopes to bring to Washington if elected. Sean covers a multitude of wide-ranging issues, including those political in nature, and talks about the importance of the upcoming election with regard to our liberty and way of life. If you're wondering why politics are important, albeit tough to talk about, and why taking a stand and coming up with a unifying set of principles is essential, check this episode out now. You are going to love it. Also, quick note, this is our first political podcast that we've ever done. I've steered away from politics in the past, but I do believe that what's going on right now is so essential and critical to our liberty and freedom that we have to discuss it. Whether you're Republican or Democrat, it doesn't really matter. We're talking about a unifying set of principles that apply to all of us, across all parties, across the aisle. And whether you agree with me or not politically and who I vote for, who I choose, who I believe in, it doesn't matter either. I respect your opinion. I respect your views. I respect who you vote for. I just want the same from you. So you may love this episode, you may hate this episode. All I ask is that you respect this episode and have an open mind when listening to it, and let me know your feedback, because I'm sure a lot of you guys will love it, and I'm sure some of you probably won't like it and may hate it. But either way, I do believe the topic is important, and many of these issues that we discuss in this episode are vitally important right now. The best self-help book ever written has now become the best self-help audiobook ever recorded. Go to elitemindbook.com to pick yourself up Elite Mind, the audiobook, today on Audible. It's also available on iTunes and all the other platforms that have audiobooks where you listen to them on. It's on there as well. Pick yourself up Elite Mind. I'm telling you, this book, an audiobook, if you haven't gotten the paperback or Kindle yet, will change your life. All right, guys, we're live. It's Justin Stenstrom from Elite Man Magazine, and my guest today is Sean Parnell, the author of the new book that just came out, One Patriot. Is that right?
One True Patriot.
One True Patriot. Sorry, I actually had the copy, too, in my hand a little while ago. I put it down right before the call, and I haven't been able to read it yet, but it's kind of interesting because it's a fiction story, but it's based on this guy named Eric Steele who's in the military. I'm sure he's kind of based off a lot of the things you've seen, or even, you personally, but it just came out, I believe, a recording of this call September 1st, so within a few days of the call. Man, what's it like writing that book? A New York Times #1 bestseller, and then, the other one, and then this one's going to be a bestseller as well. What's it like writing that and having that background that you can plug in to that main character?
Well, I never really expected to write books, it was never really in the cards for me. I mean, I came back from Afghanistan. I was over there, and I remember making myself a promise and thinking, like, you know what, if I somehow make it out of here alive, I'm going to do everything I can to tick items off my bucket list. You know what I mean? And the fact of the matter is that after a couple of deployments, my soldiers and I were on. I went on one deployment, and then my platoon went back. A lot of my guys didn't make it home, and so, for me, it's they didn't get to come home and live a life and enjoy the trappings of freedom that we have here in this country. And so I just felt like coming home, it was my duty and obligation to live a life worthy of that sacrifice. And so I came home, and I came back to grad school. I was medically retired before my time. I was wounded in Afghanistan, medically retired. I intended to go into the military and make it a career, 20 years, go into the Special Forces, Green Berets, and do all that cool, sexy stuff. Didn't happen because I wounded. But I came back, went to grad school, and I said, you know what, I'm going to do everything I can to try to tell the story of my troops, because most Americans had no idea what was going on in Afghanistan. And that sort of started this journey for me. And Outlaw Platoon was brutal, man. I mean, it was a steep learning curve, especially like with regards to, learning how to write a book, trying to get an agent, trying to have an agent sell it to a publisher, and all that stuff was crazy. But once we sort of figured that out, the book took off. I mean, and it became an instant New York Times bestseller, and that gave me a platform to do other things. So Outlaw Platoon came out in 2012, and then it went right back into learning about how to write fiction. And my first fiction book, Man of War, didn't come out until 2018. So 6 years in between, but here we are, in the third book.
Yeah, that's awesome, dude. I really can't wait to dive into it. I haven't had a chance yet, but I will be diving into it soon. And I'm looking forward to it. It's just an incredible story that you have, and then I think you relay that into the characters that you create in the story as well, just kind of reading the synopsis of it in the past books. Very interesting, man. Very good stuff. So you got, I believe, 2 bronze medals and a Purple Heart. Is that right, before?
Yeah, 2 Bronze Stars, one for Valor, and a Purple Heart, yeah.
Nice. So is that when you got medically discharged from the armies after you got the Purple Heart? Because that's when you get injured, right?
Yeah, when you're in Afghanistan, I got blown up by a rocket propelled grenade and I was wounded, and you get the Purple Heart when that happens, and then Bronze Star for Valor is for heroism in combat, just for something that you do that's heroic, and the other Bronze Star I got was for the 16 months in Afghanistan.
And so you said before your dream was to basically get into Special Forces Delta and do that kind of stuff, but after that, the injury and you get discharged from the military, you're kind of looking at a different path now in life and kind of choosing different things, or at least deciding on something you want to choose. As it turns out, this is interesting too, because I heard this on other interviews that you did, other talks. For some reason, President Trump reached out a couple of years back, and this is where I didn't quite get the story, which is why I'm really interested in it. But he reached out, and you're the only civilian in, as far as you can recall, or in history, that had a president say that you should run for Congress. So at that point, after being in the military, and I'm sure it had a lot to do with the military, he goes and says that you should be running for Congress, and then you take up that as almost like a call to arms or a call to service. And then here you are right now running for Congress in, I think, the 16th district of Pennsylvania?
17th. 17th. Yeah.
Okay. In Pennsylvania. So did that happen immediately after your discharge from the Army? And then how did that come about where this guy, the president of all people, calls upon a civilian, you, to then run for office? How does that story go?
No, I've been out of the military since December 19, 2010. So for a decade.
Okay.
Yeah. So Outlaw Platoon came out 2 years after I got out of the military. Again, that came out in 2012. And I've just been doing charity work and working in the civilian world, writing books for a living, doing speaking engagements. And I've got a charity that gives service dogs to veterans, first responders, and their families. And I've just been doing that for 8 years. And then one day, President Trump didn't reach out to me. I guess he just heard about me through someone. And still don't really know for sure. I'd never met him or talked to him at that point, but he had called me out in a speech in Western Pennsylvania. He was giving a speech at the Marcellus Shale Coalition, and he called me out randomly to run, and I wasn't even there at the event. So I got a call from my mom. I was down in South Carolina doing a charity event down there, just giving a veteran a service dog. And she's just basically told me that President Trump had called me out to run for Congress, and I was like, okay. So I turned my life upside down and got in the race, and I've been running for Congress ever since.
Wow. So what year was that, 2016 that he said that?
No, it was October of 2019. He just did it this year.
Sorry,
yeah. Yeah.
Wow, wow.
Yeah. So he called me out it feels like just yesterday, but it's been 10 months ago. So, running for Congress was never in the cards for me. But anyhow, yeah, here I am. And I feel like, this isn't really about politics to me. I'm not a career politician, never done anything like this before, but, the job is to represent the people, and that's what I intend to do. And so been campaigning for 10 months, and I feel like we're going to win. I feel like we've got all the momentum on the ground and doing everything that we can to build coalitions and raise money and do what's necessary to win in November.
Nice. So you never have you spoken to Trump since then?
Once.
Once.
So yeah, the vice president was here, and I was I just at an event with him. He was speaking, walked up the stage, did a couple of interviews, and said, sort of gave me the knife hand and said, "Step into my office." And I'm like looking around. I'm like, "Me? You want me to step into your office?" And it's like this. He asked me to get in his up armored SUV in his motorcade, and I'm sitting next to him, and right across from, sitting in the two bucket chairs in the back, like there's me and then the vice president right next to me, and in between us is this phone with the presidential seal on it. And President Trump had called me while I was in that convoy with the vice president, and I probably got like 4 words in, "Thank you, Mr. President," and then he did the rest of the talking. But that was about it. I haven't talked to him since. But that was the only time I talked to him. It was probably for less than 15 minutes. But it's crazy, man, because in just 10 years, when I was put out of the military, I didn't have like a backup plan for life. When I say I wanted to go in and make a career of it, I intended to stay in for 20 years. I never intended to be wounded in combat. And I suppose I always knew it was a possibility, but it just never, going into it, you just never think that that's going to happen to you. So it's put out, and to go from leaving the military and broke, into 10 years later, the president called me out to run, and now I got the chance to ride around in the motorcade with the vice president, and culminating with speaking on one of the largest stages on the planet at the Republican National Convention. It's a blessing, but it's just kind of unbelievable. It's kind of unbelievable, my journey to this spot, and I mean, I can't remember the last time, and you'd mentioned something about this, a couple minutes ago, but I can't remember the last time a president called a random citizen out to run for Congress in a primary, while a Republican primary is going on. I've never heard of something like that happening, but it happened to me, and it's kind of just been crazy.
What do you think it was before? And by the way, let me just say this. We actually have never covered politics on the show. We kind of steer away from it, although many issues overlap into politics without even realizing that it's politics. And then especially, in the last like 6 months or so with the whole shutdown and the pandemic, and that you really start to realize in the past few months of like how important politics are, at least political discussions.
Absolutely.
And I mean, manners of that, where like one thing or another can literally change your life overnight, and the people you love overnight. And if you don't have a say in that, your rights can be taken like literally overnight, and like has happened in the past few months. And then trying to get those things back, like if we don't fight for those things, they're going to be gone. We're never going to get those things back. And we can dive more into that in a little bit, but I just want to say that before we kind of dive more into this. But I looked into your stuff. I saw a bunch of interviews you did, obviously like checked up on the work, and I love the fact that you don't consider yourself a politician. You just consider yourself a good person trying to do what's right for yourself, your family, your country. And, Republican or Democrat aside, I think you kind of transcend the fact of like, political parties. And man, if I was in Pennsylvania, I would definitely vote for you. And this is why I wanted to have you on the show, to kind of get your story out, to show that you're not just like a politician. You're somebody trying to make a change for the betterment of the people around you.
I appreciate you saying that. I actually loathe being called a politician. People and people don't mean anything by it. They'll be like, "Oh, you're a politician now," and I'm like, "No, I'm not. I'll never be a politician. I'm not. Yeah. I'm not in this. I'm running with an R after my name, but I'm not in this to just represent Republicans. The job is to represent everybody, and the job is to not only show up where people don't agree with you or where people agree with you, but to show up especially where people don't, and do everything you can to talk things over, meet in the middle, come to consensus, and do what's best on behalf of the American people. And so you mentioned, staying away from politics, and lots of different shows do that. And that's totally cool. And I did too, until the president called me out. But then the thing about it is that, and you talked about this with the pandemic, but like politics has a way of finding us, even though we steered clear of politics in general, and the pandemic is a perfect example. Look what happened overnight. I'm not discounting the pandemic. Of course, we have to take it seriously. Of course, we've got to protect the vulnerable. I mean, but governors, by and large, just lock things down. Emergency declaration. People lost their freedom pretty quickly. And now here in the state of Pennsylvania, our governor just extended our disaster emergency declaration, and cases have trended down, every week on the week for the last 5 weeks, and we're below the threshold of what would be declared a pandemic. And so why? I mean, I'm not saying that we shouldn't take this seriously. I'm not saying that we shouldn't protect the vulnerable. I'm not saying any of that, but we know a lot more now about this virus than we did 6 months ago. So let's shift our focus here a little bit. Let's adapt our strategy. Let's adopt a more surgical pandemic response, right? And let's start opening up our economy again and letting people go back to work, because people in and around my area, man, like, this is a manufacturing district. There's a lot of people that work in oil and gas, a lot of people that work in steel mills, a lot of people that work in manufacturing. They can't just learn to code and work from home, bro. I mean, that's just not easy, So I hate to see food lines in my district. So the point is, why are we extending a disaster declaration in Pennsylvania? I mean, again, it was supposed to be 15 days to slow the spread. Then it was 30, and now it's 3 months, and now we're damn near 6 months into this thing to slow the spread, right? Yeah. But the goalposts have always moved, Yeah. Early on, it was never about protecting people from getting the virus. It was about preventing our healthcare system from being overwhelmed. Well, now it's like you've got governors that have moved the goalposts constantly. They're saying, well, we can't do anything until we have a vaccine. But we might not ever have a vaccine. We might not ever have a viable vaccine that is effective. So how can that be the benchmark? So when I say I don't care about politics, that might not be a popular decision, the things that I'm talking about now. But you know what? I believe that they're the right decisions, because this job is not about taking popular decisions, about doing what you think is best for the people. And sometimes it means standing up there on the parapet and taking a stance on something that might not be perceived as popular, at least early on,
Yeah, 100%, man. And you're right. I was actually one of the few people that disagreed with the shutdown altogether, even in the beginning, because I looked at the research coming from China and Italy and all the other places, and you could see that the contagious rate was like 10 times more than they really said. So that death rate was 10 times lower than they really said, even from the beginning. And you looked at studies like there's one that came out in a book in the 80s they wrote, where it's for every 1% unemployment increase, there's a 37 or so thousand increase in deaths from heart disease, like stress-related factors, heart disease, suicide, crime. All those things go up when unemployment goes up. You're looking at shutting down the greatest economy in history for a virus that wasn't even as deadly. They look at it now. In the beginning, if you said this is very controversial, but you say it now, it's very true. It's as deadly as the flu. It might be more contagious, 3 times more contagious, but it's the same death rate as the flu. So you're shutting down the greatest economy for a virus where you could have prevented it by having the weak, the vulnerable, the ones with pre-existing conditions. You shelter those people. You don't shut down the healthy people like yourself or I, the younger generation who is perfectly able to go out, work, and keep the economy going. I think it was a mistake from the beginning, because look what happens now. They always say slippery slope, but look what happens now. We're in this 6 months in with no end in sight. All these economies in these states are crumbling, and the suicide rate's gone up 600%. The job loss has been incredible, the economic, and then, of course, then you look at things like vaccines. When they're trying to force the vaccines, they say you can't go to the next stage. And like Massachusetts, where I'm from, we're not going to have stage 4, which is opening everything up, bars, clubs, till a vaccine comes, and they're going to try to mandate that. They just mandated last week the flu vaccine, which was never mandated in any state or as far as I know, in history in the U.S., but they just mandated it in mass last week. Charlie Baker, he's actually a Republican, by the way. But I just think it's such now that, like you said, they're changing the goalposts, they're moving it, they're changing like their timelines, and this is what happens when you lose up the freedoms.
That's right, and that's you made that point earlier, and it was a good one. And here's the thing, Governor Wolf, who's our governor here in Pennsylvania, he was out protesting, a couple months ago when all the protests kicked off, and then the protests turned into violent rioting, looting, and burning down people's businesses and stuff like that, and injuring cops. And, I think 8 or 9 cops here were seriously injured in Pittsburgh. One guy got hit in the head with a brick. They actually call it something that bricked. They bricked the police officer, and he was in critical condition for a while in the hospital. But my point is that Governor Wolf was asked about this and say, hey, wait a second, you're out here protesting, you're like violating your own orders. And Governor Wolf's response was like, and I'm paraphrasing, well, I think the cause was worth the risk. And I said, but like so you get to make that decision, but no one else in the state does, right? And not only that, like protesting for this cause is okay, but protesting reopening is not. And so you see what I mean? So politics will find you even if you're not interested in politics, especially in a time of crisis like we're in right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but going back to before, so you've talked to President Trump once, and it was brief, and he did most of the talking, like he's a big talker. But going back, like in your head now, and to that moment where he called you out and told you to run, what do you think it was that he saw in you, perhaps, that made him say that, or what was the reasoning, do you think, like kind of looking back in hindsight, why he picked you to run?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't even know. I think maybe like a congressman here, his name is Mike Kelly. I've known him for quite some time. He's been a friend and mentor of mine for a while. He and Trump, the president, are about the same age, and they're both business owners. And I think that they're friends, and they were together before this event. So maybe Congressman Kelly mentioned something about it. I don't know. But I'll tell you, it certainly turned my life upside down. Maybe it was my military. Maybe he had heard about my military service. I still don't even know for sure. But I don't know. It's interesting because I do feel, even though this was never in the cards for me, this is, a lot of politicians will like set their sights on a seat and say, okay, I'm going to run for this office and then this office. And then they just become career politicians. That was never in the cards for me like that. So I didn't ever look at my life taking a turn like this, but here we are. But I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, and so, which I find interesting given that this was never part of my life's plan.
Yeah. Well, I know you spoke at the RNC last week, a couple weeks ago, and perhaps you were on like Fox News a lot. You were on some of the shows a lot promoting the book. He must have come across at some point though, right, with the book and just knowing your background. He probably saw an interview. I know he watches that.
You know what? That's a good point too. Yeah, he actually I think this was before. Yeah, this was before I got in the race. I said something about how the troops appreciate President Trump, and President Trump saw it. And he said something, oh my God, I'm sorry, I'm yawning. This job is like a 20-hour day job. I'm sorry about that.
Okay.
But President Trump said like, oh, thank you, Sean. He like tweeted about me. And I came back from doing the segment on Fox, and I look at my phone, it was just like blowing up. I'm like, what the heck is going on? And I look, and President Trump had tweeted about me randomly. So he did know about me. It's interesting that you say that. He did know about me. He'd seen me on Fox before, but I didn't think he knew anything about me.
Yeah.
I didn't think he knew anything about my military record or anything like that.
That's pretty cool. So, but
it is. It's cool.
Thinking about it now, though, what makes do you think about yourself is gonna make you a good leader in Pennsylvania? And by the way, do you have any? You mentioned you're not a career politician. You don't even like being called a politician. But do you have any aspirations greater than being a rep at this point? Like down the line,
no.
Is it even a possibility though?
No. I mean, look, you know what? Let me walk that back. Anything is possible, given that the president called me out. I mean, I didn't. Sure. You know what I mean? So that was about as random a thing as you could possibly imagine. So I won't rule anything out. But my desire is to go to Washington, hit the reset button on everything, give the power in this country back to the people where it belongs. I personally believe that there's a direct correlation between a small government in Washington and more freedom in our day-to-day lives. Yeah. The smaller and less powerful the government is, the more freedom that we have. I want you, your family, to have as much freedom as you desire. I want you to I want to protect and preserve the American way of life. I want you to live your life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness the way that you want, not the way that the government tells you should do it. That's what being an American is all about. And so that's my goal. And when I'm done with that, I will move back to Western Pennsylvania, buy a farm, and probably never talk to anybody again. So, and this is not something that's going to be a career to me. This is not something that, it just isn't, man. And as far as like, what are some of my goals? I just desire to be a leader. You know, you rightfully mentioned the pandemic is like a point where most people started paying attention and thinking like, wait, these decisions could affect me, right? The governor's order, I'm burning through my life savings because of it. I'm about to go out of business, you know, because the governor has me locked down. Like, these decisions affect me, especially in a time of crisis. What I endeavor to do is just be a leader, be there for the people. That's what the job is. And if it means, you know, again, I'm a Republican, I'm a proud Republican and conservative. I believe what I believe. But if the Republican Party, for whatever reason, was doing something that was not good for the people here in Western Pennsylvania, you can bet I'd vote against whatever they were putting on the floor. Yeah. You know, so that was sort of part of my job as a platoon leader in Afghanistan too. You know, like when I was in charge, right, in command in Afghanistan, wasn't in command, I was a platoon leader. So, which is essentially I'm in charge of a 40-man infantry platoon. We weren't all Republicans, right? There were Republicans and Democrats and black and white and Christians and atheists and Northerners and Southerners. 6 of my guys weren't even citizens. So I couldn't figure out a way as a leader to bring that group of people together, look past our many differences, right? That we would have probably died on some random hilltop on the border of Afghanistan and Pakistan. So that lesson in my life taught me the number one leadership lesson. The bedrock of my entire philosophy is do everything you can to bring people together. To let Americans, to give Americans the ability to see past their many differences and unite. It's not just about diversity for diversity's sake, right? The fact that we are a diverse nation is, of course, a strength. But unless we can unify beyond that diversity, we're not as strong as we could be, you know, and that is what I want to do. And that's what I spoke about the Republican National Convention. And the president let me script my own remarks. You know, I wrote that speech, I gave that speech, and the president gave me the freedom and latitude to do that.
Yeah, it was a hell of a speech too. It's just 5 minutes long, like I mentioned before. You did a great job, man. I liked it a lot.
It was overwhelming, man. It was overwhelming. That whole experience was just crazy, man. Like, cause I'm just a blue collar guy from Western Pennsylvania, you know, like the whole experience, like I go in there, his staff is moving and grooving all around the place. They all got these masks with presidential seals, the little boom mics, and they're talking. It was like a well-oiled machine for sure, but it was an overwhelming experience.
Yeah, it's got to be a hell of like a lifetime, once in a lifetime kind of thing. You mentioned a good thing.
It certainly felt like that.
An interesting point a moment ago, which was diversity. And it's a very interesting topic because I think most people would agree that diversity is a good thing. Diversity, like having different cultures, having different races, having different creeds, religious beliefs, like having all those things makes up what America really is. That's where we came from. Immigrants, we're a nation of immigrants, all a great thing. But I think a lot of people get lost in the fact that just being diverse doesn't necessarily mean you have, say, strength or you have.
You're right about that.
Uniting.
You're right about that.
You got to have something that unites everybody together, like a certain belief and value system that brings the diversity together. It's good to have individual people, but you got to have a common cause.
Absolutely, and diversity is a great strength. But if you're not unified behind, you know, in our case, in Afghanistan, unified under a common banner in support of a common mission, then you're not as strong as you could be, you know? And you know, Abraham Lincoln said a house divided against itself can't stand. And that he was referring to the fact that, of course, we all come from all over the world. But the reason why we learned that America is a melting pot is because people come here and they maintain their regional or international identity, but then they learn about our country, they become Americans, and they assimilate into our culture, and we're all united under the banner of our flag and our Constitution and our Bill of Rights. And so, you've got to have unity. It's not just about diversity. Diversity is great, but you've got to have unity as well.
If your mailbox is anything like mine, 90% of the time it's a fairly depressing place. Political flyers, utility bills, unholy amounts of coupons. But once a month, I do have a reason to be stoked, and that's because of my box of awesome from Bespoke Post. I recently got the Weekender box, and I have to say, this is one of the nicest bags I've ever owned. The special edition Weekender bag is durable, beautifully crafted, and built to last. It's a head turner and will be a conversation starter wherever you bring it. And trust me, you'll be bringing this bag everywhere you go. Bespoke Post sends guys only the best stuff every month. And no matter what you're into, Box of Awesome has you covered. From style and grooming goods to barware, cooking tools, and outdoor gear, Box of Awesome has carefully built collections for every part of your life. I can't wait to check out their new Box of Awesome collections too. The Terror looks really cool for when I go hiking, and the Chill will be perfect for having some ice-cold drinks on the beach. Get 20% off your first monthly box when you sign up at boxofawesome.com and enter the code EliteMan at checkout. That's boxofawesome.com, code EliteMan for 20% off your first box. Yeah, diversity in and of itself, I don't believe is a strength. I think it's a good thing. It's a thing we can appreciate, like the differences of people, uniqueness of people. But I think the strength comes from bringing people together and having something we all like can fight for and believe in. What, as a leader though, a platoon leader, guy who led 40 other men into battle, what were some of the things that you had as far as like mindset goes, as far as like daily practices goes to bring people together? Like I heard you mention in another show that you had people, every single race, every single religious belief, every single like Muslims, Christians, black, white, brown. You had all these different types of people from these backgrounds, but you had to bring them together for that common goal. Or like you said a moment ago, you could have been killed on top of a hill. I believe it was like 25 of you guys at one point versus a couple hundred other people in a battle. How did you bring everyone together and like that? What was the mindset that you had?
Well, I think everybody realized, with life and death on the line, I really do believe everybody realized, hey, we all bleed red. At the end of the day, yeah, we are very different, but we all bleed red. There are no hyphenated Americans in my platoon. We were just Americans, and that allowed us to accomplish things that we thought weren't, that we never thought were possible, and I was inspired by my troops on a day-to-day basis. These were just 18-year-old kids whose job before coming in the Army was high school shortstop. These weren't, we had some cool, sexy training, but we weren't like Navy SEALs. We were just young infantry guys. It was because we were unified, because we loved one another, that allowed us to do extraordinary things in battle. It was because we were afraid of letting each other down that we were able to accomplish extraordinary things in battle. I had 6 soldiers who were shot in the head, and all of them were back on the battlefield at some point. Some took a little longer than others. But, I had a guy that was shot in the head, wrapped his head up in bandages, and 48 hours later, he was back on guard and back on patrol because he didn't think it was fair that the men in my platoon went out and without him there. He felt like he was failing them. You know what I mean? And that allowed him to drive on, farther than he ever thought possible.
Oh shit, that's incredible, man. So taking that mindset, that attitude that you had, what are some of the ways that you can bring into Congress different methods of unifying this country? Because as you know right now, like we're at, as Republican and Democrats go, and on both sides of the aisle, black, white, there's a lot of issues, social issues, of course the pandemic going on right now. There's a lot of issues across the board that's dividing a lot of people. As someone who's going to be hopefully a part of that Congress and part of the solution, what are some of your plans to actually unify this country?
Well, being a leader, I think, is the most important thing. When the dust settles from this pandemic and this economic crisis, and hopefully it will soon, my hope is that people in this country realize just how important leaders are. We need more leaders in Congress and fewer politicians, And so for me, part of it is just using my platform to reach across the aisle and maybe not even reach across the aisle, but reach out and say, the Republican Party, we are the Big Tent party. We don't always have to agree, but you are welcome. Who says we have to? Like, there's this idea in party politics that we all have to agree on everything. I get the question from the media all the time. Well, tell me an area where you don't agree with President Trump. Like they'd be surprised to find out that I had some. But wait, like I got a big Italian family. We sit around the Thanksgiving dinner table and we don't agree on anything. So
Yeah.
why is there an expectation, an underlying expectation that we need to? We don't. The Republican Party believes in individual freedom. It doesn't matter who you love. It doesn't matter what your skin color is. It doesn't matter what you do for a living. Even if you're a Democrat who believes that your party is too radical, like, well, then stand with us. That's the message that I was sending at the Republican National Convention. If you love America, there is room for you in the Republican Party. Do we always have to agree? No. And so leadership means taking every available opportunity that you have to drive home your leadership philosophy so that you can bring people into your tent, that you can unite people. And the Republican National Convention, for me, was just the latest example. That was not a typical convention speech. In years past, people did not give convention speeches like the one I just gave, right? But the Republican Party is changing. And if I'm going to be a leader in that party, then I want to be on the front end of that change, right? And so, I also think you have to do everything you can to work across the aisle and find pragmatic ways that you can work across the aisle without necessarily compromising your values or compromising the promises that you made to the people in the region that you represent, right? I know maybe saying, oh, leadership is maybe a reductionistic answer, but I don't think it is. I think we need leaders in Congress now more than ever, and standing up, fighting for what you believe in, but also welcoming people into your tent is a first and foremost responsibility of a leader.
As a leader, though, and you make a lot of good points. I want to touch on a couple of them. As a leader, though, when you're trying to, say, get your agenda across, of a unifying agenda, where you want to bring people together, do you have to come down and compromise with people on certain values and beliefs that you have, or is it more like, this is what I want to do, you're welcome to join me, but if you don't want to believe in these things yourself, then I can't really be a part of what you're trying to do? Sometimes
it means that. When I talk to you about, leaders using their platform, or what they sometimes, which is sometimes called like a bully pulpit, Ronald Reagan did this all the time. Ronald Reagan was able to accomplish extraordinary things working across the aisle with Tip O'Neill because he was able to shape cultural sentiment, unite people under his idea of what America should be. He was able to unite people under a common banner on what his vision of the future should be. And guess what? Once public sentiment shifted to what he felt was the best vision for America's future, well, politics is downstream from culture, So every one of those congressmen that are representing those areas and have people in their district that believe in the same thing that Ronald Reagan was advocating for, well, guess what? It becomes easy for those congressmen to take those positions because the public does as well. So politics is always downstream from culture. That's why leaders have to be unafraid in advocating for what they believe in, and not just internally on interviews like this, but up on, the world's biggest stage like the Republican National Convention, right? We can shape cultural sentiment by doing that, by being out front, by leading. And when the public is on board with this, everything else falls into place. You know what I mean? Yeah. And Ronald Reagan was an expert at that. President Trump is good at that as well in his own way. President Trump is a fighter. And, for a long time, the Republican Party, they, like, for example, like John McCain was a guy that I admired a lot. He was a war hero. But the Democrat Party, when he ran for president, made him out to be like some sort of war criminal. Mitt Romney, when he ran for president, Mitt Romney is probably one of the most boring people on the face of the planet. I've never met him, but he strikes me as a pretty run-of-the-mill, boring dude, right?
Yeah.
They made him out to be the binders full of women guy, right? So both Mitt Romney and John McCain lost, right? Because they didn't necessarily fight back against what the media portrayal of them was at the time. Yeah. President Trump does, and that's why President Trump won. And that's why people elected him, so that he could fight. He could fight back for them. And so, I've got tens of thousands of Democrats here at PA 17 that voted for President Trump. Why? Because they're sick and tired of politics as usual on either side of the aisle, And that's something that even in 2020, the media just fundamentally does not understand we elected President Trump to be a disruptor. And so when he says, I mean, do I agree with everything he tweets? Heck no, but he's a disruptor. That's why people elected him, And so good leaders use their bully pulpit to shape cultural sentiment, and that's something that I intend to do as well.
Yeah, it's a hell of a point, man. And, whether you like him or not, you got to at least respect the fact that the guy is a fighter, and I think he actually gets more hate. He definitely does. He gets more hate because he stands up and fights, whereas the other guys, McCain and Romney that you mentioned, they got trash like all the Republicans have, and
100%.
Both sides, they'll get the trash, but this guy gets it 10 times more than anyone else has because he stands up for it. And I think people actually appreciate that. Like the American citizens that see this on a day-to-day basis, they're like, all right, this guy's getting all the shit because he's fighting back on all the fake news. Like he's the first guy that I ever heard that pointed out the fake news. Until 5 years ago, no one even knew the term fake news. But then you see it now.
Yeah.
I mean, dude, you see it now, the CNN and all this other, like MSNBC, the reports that they had, especially with the coronavirus and this pandemic the last few months, it like blew my mind of how fake and one-sided they really are with something and how they won't cover both sides. And like Fox News has its problems too, but CNN is really the worst in my opinion.
Well, listen, you're right. So the full fake news thing, I used to think before I got into this, just, that's just that's Trump being Trump is what the saying goes. But it's really a thing. Like they, in my race, like, the Democrats have their media allies, and they leverage those media allies to conduct attacks on their opponent. Like, and so in my race, they've got this media guy takes everything I say out of context, you know what I mean, and cuts up different quotes, cuts them off before I make the actual point. And so I'm like thinking like, none of this is accurate, but you're a journalist, right? Like,
yeah, I know.
So I get it. I feel like what I mean, like the media has not learned since 2016. And you're right. The people of this country, in 2016, it was 63 million people thought that believed in President Trump and believed that he would fight for them. Now, the Washington establishment and the Democrats have been trying to impeach this president three months before he was even elected. From the moment he swore in and took his hand off the Bible, they have tried to impeach him. Whether it was the fake Russia hoax, which is a hoax in every sense of the word, to the Mueller probe, the Mueller report, where they dug into every aspect of his life and found nothing, to then the smear of Justice Kavanaugh and what they did to him in front of his family and his wife. All of that totally made up. To the Ukraine fiasco. I mean, my goodness, the list goes on and on and on. Now they're trotting back out. Russia's meddling in the election. I mean, it's just like, it's nonstop. And I think the American people see that, and they see the president up there working for them. And in 3 short years, despite relentless and savage attacks, by the way, sometimes against his family, they freaking attack Barron Trump. And I'm a father. I got 3 little kids. Someone messes with my kids, you can bet your ass I'll be on Twitter that day. Back off my family, right? So, like, of course the president is fiery. Of course he's a fighter, Does he always say the right thing? Absolutely not. But they've attacked him savagely and his family savagely for years. And, what would you do? I mean, what would you do? Would you stand idly by and let your family take it, or would you fight back? I think most people in this country, Democrat or Republican, say, I would fight back.
Yeah, I agree. And the sad thing is, and like the whole fake news and all that stuff, is a lot of the things that this guy proposes, Trump, is he's actually really not all like super conservative. He's actually more in the center of things. And if you look at even say the wall proposal, building the wall, the Democrats in the past voted on the exact same things that this guy wanted.
100%.
700 miles of fencing.
Chuck Schumer.
Chuck Obama did as well when he was a senator, and Clinton did as well when she was a senator. They all voted for it. I believe Biden too. They all voted for it, but then a few years later, because it becomes a different narrative and the news media pushes this narrative, it's like, oh, this guy's racist. He wants to put up a wall. He's this, he's that. It's like, believe what you want about Trump and the way he articulates things and the way he says things in times, like 100%. I agree with you on that. But at the same time, you got to look at the facts of like what he's actually doing and his actions as opposed to just his words. And actions speak louder than words, 100%. As they say.
Yes.
man, like,
yes, you're
when
right.
you look into the shit like this, it's like blows your mind of like how double, like two-faced the media can be with like one thing, and like they know what people have said in the past, but they won't cover it, and they just like spotlighting this thing to make them look bad. And it's one thing after another. You name Ukraine, the Russian hoax, the this, the that. It's like, man, at some point you got to just kind of believe.
Look at what happened with Speaker Pelosi yesterday. A video comes out. She's in San Francisco. She's in a salon. She's not wearing a mask.
Oh yeah.
Salons have been closed for 6 months. You can't even go to the freaking beach in California.
Yep.
She is defying, these Democrat mandated lockdowns and doing whatever the heck she wants to do. And by the way, people are losing everything. They're burning through their life savings.
Yeah.
Their businesses are closing. People have had to watch family members die through a window because of adhering to these lockdowns. But Pelosi wants to get a freaking haircut or a blowout or whatever you call it. Well, she doesn't matter. She's the third most powerful woman in the world. She does it. Rules for thee, but not for me, right? Yeah. And this is the kind of stuff that the media, instead of covering this, accurately, people in the media started saying, well, look, she was ambushed, or look, are you allowed to record someone like that? It's like, what? Wait a second. You're not talking about her astounding hypocrisy and the fact that even the salon owner, who hasn't been able to make a living at all, she didn't even know that Speaker Pelosi was in there. Like, this is why the president won. It's this kind of career politician that has a disdain for the people, and the only thing that she cares about is her position and her power and keeping it. That's it. That is it. Mm-hmm. And everything else comes secondary to that. And that President Trump won because of that dynamic.
Because, like he said, there is a swamp in Washington. It's been there for years, and like him or not, like his character or not, the guy is, like you, in a lot of ways, is not a politician. Like, he just wasn't part of this system that has been corrupted for so many years. He's just a regular dude. Obviously, he's got billions of dollars. He's not just a regular dude, but he's basically a regular guy who wanted to make changes. He didn't actually benefit from this presidency, if you look at it. All of the presidents, too, have benefited from becoming president. This guy has taken a hit to his career, his character, his money, his wealth. His net worth is, like, dropped in half. I mean, across the board.
He's taken a pay cut. He's taken a pay cut since being president of the United States. And that's why I laugh at these stupid Lincoln Project ads saying that the president's only in it for himself.
Yeah.
The president gets savagely attacked every day. His net worth is decreased. He's taken a pay cut. He's in it just for himself. It's the most absurd logic ever.
I know. And then you look at other politicians like Lori Lightfoot, the mayor of Chicago or whatever, and a few months back she's getting her hair cut too. And she had just locked down, shut everything down. This is months ago in the very beginning of this thing, too. They find her out getting her hair cut. She said, I have to look good.
Exactly. Yeah. Governor Whitmer violated her own lockdowns. Mayor of Philadelphia violated his own lockdown. Andrew Cuomo caught him outside a couple days ago without a mask, violated his own lockdown. De Blasio, same thing. These liberal, these far left liberal politicians have almost all violated their own lockdown protocol. Governor Wolf, same thing, marching with protesters. Well, I thought the cause was worth the risk. It's like, why are you the only one that gets to make that call?
Yeah, no shit.
So, I mean, it's just, I think Americans' eyes are opened up to it. And you see, like, Joe Biden leaving his basement for the first time in months. Do you know why he's doing that? He's doing that because his poll numbers are tanking. Yeah. Americans are seeing through this nonsense. They're seeing the riots. They're seeing the burning. They're seeing the looting. People are tired of it. And they also watched the Democratic National Convention for a week where no one said anything about it.
Yeah.
And so poll numbers plummet. Joe Biden comes out of hiding. Oh, all of a sudden, magically, he condemns the rioting. Like, where have you been for the last 4 months?
When it's convenient and it's going to help his cause, then he condemns it. But in the beginning, when everyone knew it was wrong, I mean, most sane people know that burning, rioting, looting, killing, even in some cases, is wrong. You have to condemn it right away. But
Absolutely.
He can't do that because he's going to divide, people in his party. So he doesn't want to, cause any problems with that. He wants to get the radical left. But I'm not even Democrat. I'm not Republican. I'm in the middle. I am an independent. I have always been, because I've seen a lot of fake shit on both sides. I've seen a lot of fake Republicans. I've seen a lot of fake Democrats. But it just seems like over the past few years, it's mostly coming from the Democratic side, and There's still some good Democrats for sure, but it's like you just mentioned, you rattle off 7 or 8 people that will have their own laws of shutting down the economy, shutting down businesses, shutting down the rights of people to go out and do their thing, but they'll still go out and do their own thing. So it's a hypocrisy. It's a double standard, and they can't follow through. And I think, like you said, it's the reason why I think a lot of people are tuning in and listening, and they want that change. They want to, reelect Trump for a second term, is because they see what's going on, and they see that there's a lot of crazy, like even Biden said a few weeks ago, if he gets elected and the scientists say to shut down again, he'll have a whole shutdown.
He'll do it.
A mask mandate for the whole country. Like, who the hell wants to wear a mask 24/7 indefinitely for the next X amount of years? I think this mask thing is, I never agree with it in the beginning, but I think it's probably going to run its course in a few months if the right person gets elected. But if the wrong person gets elected, we might be wearing masks the rest of our lives.
Well, I mean, I think you would agree, as someone who has read a lot of the studies, that the science behind universal masking is dubious at best.
Yes.
And so I'm with you there completely. And I want to circle back to Biden not saying anything until his poll numbers dropped. Do you realize how egregious that is? Like, how horrible that is?
Yeah.
So it didn't matter who lost their business or it didn't matter how much money people lost, or whose businesses closed, or who was hurt, or who was killed, to Joe Biden until it affected him in the polls. And that is a problem. That's a major problem.
It is. I mean, it just goes to show you the type of character that the man has. And again, like, it's not like Trump is a perfect man. He says a lot of shit. He does things that I've disagreed with in the past. Even the fact that he still has Fauci around in his cabinet making a lot of these orders. I've called Fauci a fraud from the day one. I never liked the guy. He's a crook. He's hooked up with Bill Gates. Bill Gates is another crook that I think they should investigate, look into these guys, because they stand to make all this money. Bill Gates has all these vaccine companies. He's going to make billions upon billions of dollars when the vaccine comes out. And Fauci's his puppet. And from day one, I've never agreed with them. So Trump has done things that I have not liked at all. He's said things that I've hated. Sometimes he acts a certain way, but it's like when you look at, like I said, the root actions of what these guys are doing overall, you got 2 choices, I think, come November. You got one of socialism and bigger government and mandates and lockdowns and further shutdowns. And then you got more freedoms. You got the guy who's never been a politician until a couple of years ago, who wants to have more freedoms. Again, he messes up, says stupid shit, does a lot of questionable things at times. But at the same time, he's going to continue the freedoms that Americans have. And you just look at the things that they're saying, things that they're doing the past few months. One guy stands for freedom, opportunity, smaller government, and the other guy stands for socialism, bigger government, more mandates and restrictions.
100%. I mean, Joe Biden has all but said, you elect me, I'm raising your taxes. And oh, by the way, I think that that's fundamentally wrong on a lot of different levels, but people can barely put food on the table as it is right now. And he's talking about raising taxes in the middle of a pandemic. How about this? I want you to keep more of your own money, because it's your money. You earned it. You know best how to spend it.
Yeah.
How about that? That's
Sounds
a pretty novel concept, and so you're right. This is a fight for the heart and soul of this country. The choice is pretty simple: freedom or socialism, the ability to chart your own path in this country, or total government control over every aspect of your life. And I choose freedom.
Me too. Every day of the week. I do want to wrap up in a moment, Sean. It's been a great interview. Just a couple quick more questions. What are your thoughts on censorship? Because I think this is kind of been put in the background, especially with the pandemic and the social issues going on right now. But I do think censorship is probably one of the biggest, if not the upcoming biggest, issues in this country, of different media censorships, big tech censorship, and then censorship actually of a lot of conservative voices.
Oh, it's a real problem. I mean, open and honest debate is what this country was founded upon. The First Amendment must be fiercely defended. The First Amendment protects against all forms of speech, especially the speech that you don't like. And so, Section 230, I'm not as well versed on that as I probably should be. But there's no question that the censorship on Twitter and in some cases on Facebook only really go one way. Conservatives every single day are getting suspended or lifelong bans for really no reason. I mean, my personal philosophy is I trust the American people to determine what they believe is loathsome. And oh, by the way, censorship does not work. So look at Laura Loomer, right? They banned her from every social media platform there is. She's running for Congress. I think she's coming close to, or she's running a credible campaign. She's coming close to outraising her incumbent opponent. She's banned from every social media platform. I mean, for real. Well, guess what? She's on Parley now. She has almost 600,000 followers there, and she's running for Congress, and she might win. So the point is, we should trust the American people to determine what we believe is loathsome, right? Because generally speaking, the American people are pretty smart and can determine that stuff on their own. But also, censorship doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So, it's a problem, needs to be dealt with. For sure, and it's definitely something that when I win, we're gonna look at it for sure.
Love it. Yeah, I got a YouTube video taken down a few months ago about vitamin C and how it can boost your immune system. I had a bunch of references, scientific literature in there. Multiple doctors in the past have used it to, fight off colds and all kinds of things, flu even. But they pulled it down because it went against the narrative of like this can boost your immune system, potentially help you with a virus, aka COVID, which is a regular virus. Common colds are 30% made up of coronaviruses, sorry. But they pulled it. They don't like that narrative. They don't like anyone going against what the CDC or the WHO, who, by the way, have been wrong multiple times over already during this thing, but they don't like anyone saying anything against what they have to say. And it's like, let the people determine that. If they want to have an alternative source of natural health, holistic health, vitamins, supplements, minerals, foods to eat to boost your immune system, what the hell's wrong with that?
Well, I mean, the right to try is something that I think is important, right? And something that my opponent voted against. But, if God forbid, you end up having some sort of, advanced stage 4 cancer and you've tried everything, right? You've tried chemo, you've tried every recommended treatment or therapeutic modality to help you fight that, and none of that works. You should have the right to try experimental medication. It's just part of being a free people.
Yeah. Absolutely. Or just even before that stage, just to boost your immune system as a natural, like even Fauci said he takes 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C, which is 10 times the normal RDA. So this guy knows that it's doing something good. He hasn't once talked about it, in these Trump's press conferences that they got. But man, it's been an awesome interview. I appreciate your take across the board on so many things. I didn't actually want to dive into too much political issues today, but I think we kind of went past that.
That's okay.
Stage.
It's all good.
And I actually like it, though. It's better because I want guys to know like where I stand on things, but also that I'm not like divided on one side or another. I'm just here to share my voice of what I think is right. And I'm a middle kind of guy. I'm on both sides, Democrat, Republican. But right now it's like you got to see the truth for what's going on. And I think you're one of the guys who has that truth and shares that truth. And, man, I hope you win come November.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. And I appreciate the time.
Yeah. So what's the last send-off takeaway message and then a place our listeners can get your new book?
Oh, yeah. You know what? My new book just came out this week. It's called One True Patriot. It's the third book. I've got 4 books out now, but this is my 3rd fiction book. It's by far the best fiction book that I've ever written. It's sort of like Mission Impossible meets 24. I think you'll really, really like it. It's a page turner. I'm really psyched about it. And you can get this book anywhere that books are sold. There's an ebook, a traditional hardcover book, and there's also an audiobook. So go out there, get it. I think you'll like it. And yeah, that's about it.
Nice. One True Patriot. I got my copy. I got to dive into it this coming week. I'll let you know what I think of it, Sean. Appreciate your time.
Let me know,
Thanks
man.
so much.
Yep. Thanks. Take care.
All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that episode. But before you go, there's one last thing I'd like you to do, and that's this. Subscribe to our podcast right now if you haven't already. By subscribing to the podcast, you get every single episode the minute they're released. Get all of our Elite Man podcast episodes and all of our world-class advice absolutely free. Subscribe now if you haven't already and become an Elite Man today. And yes, if you do love the podcast, leave us an amazing review. We really do appreciate it.